Bobby had taken over Steve Allen's office on Vine Street. And I walk into this office, and Bobby's there, and we do our, I play a few songs for him, and it's an audition basically. And he likes the way I play, and he decides that he wants to hire me. So we go into his office, and he sits in this chair, which was like a throne chair. It had like a 12-foot back to it. I couldn't believe it. And he said to me, "You know what, the files are in the other room. Go pull out a file of a tune that goes, 'The shadow of your smile, when you..." I said, "Okay, Mr. Darin." I was being a little arrogant about it. I went back to him. I mean, Bobby and I didn't know each other. And I said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Darin, there's no chart in there that goes, 'The shadow of your smile, He said, "Well, there will be by next Tuesday, won't there?" Because that was our opening at the Flamingo. So that was the first chart that I did for him. I always thought that the two people that I've perceived in my career that know the most about themselves and what's right for them musically are Bobby and Streisand. And I've worked with them both, and that's my perception of them both. Interestingly enough, for all of you astrological people, they're both Tauruses. He structured the show. I think the structure was already in place before I got there. So we start with the standards, and then in the middle of the act was the folk spot. Right. Now I had already recorded with him. That was before I became his musical director. If I Were a Carpenter. So we would do that. We'd do Simple Song of Freedom. I don't remember all the things, but that was always the middle part of the act. So that's where he played the guitar. And he tried to get me to be responsible for having it be in tune. I said, guitar player. That's one of the smartest moves I ever made, because he wasn't going to pick up that guitar and go gunk gunk and then look at me. Bobby was very specific about what tunes he wanted to do and how the tunes were to go if he didn't have any arrangements on it. I remember he wanted to open one show with Born Free, and he said, "I don't know how to do this, but I just want to hear a lot of elephants." But when the tune opens, so of course I made it trombones, and there were always those kinds of metaphors. He knew very, very much about what was good for him and what kinds of ideas worked for him. And of course he played a little piano, he played a little drums, he played a little vibes, he played a little harmonica. Mostly in the show he played guitar. And One for My Baby was one of the brilliant pieces of the act, and the impressions were fabulous. I have said always that I learned my timing on stage from Jackie Leonard and Bobby Darin. So I mean, those were the two great teachers for me on how to perform on stage and how to handle an audience and how to handle the energy of your own show. To be aware of when something goes too long, because it'll die. To know when people are applauding, when to start the next tune so that the energy, you never let the applause die out. So I learned that from Darren. The notes were always basically about how the show could be improved. It was never about what was good with the show.
Oh, that's interesting.
I did ask him once, well, gee, was there anything you liked? One of the things that the vaudevillians seem to give you is a sense of not only the show must go on, but when they go on stage, they give you 200%. And certainly Darren was one of those people. It was everything, whether he was in a good mood or he wasn't in a good mood. He was.
So if he wasn't in a good mood, how did he get himself up to do that?
Well, I'll just give you one little story. On stage, and he wasn't in a good mood, and I got depressed myself about that. And after the show was over, he came up to me, because we always did notes after the show, and he said, "Don't ever do that again." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, when I'm down, I need you up." I went a couple of times to dinner at his various homes. one to the other. One was called the White Womb.
That must have been in Beverly Hills.
It was in Coldwater Canyon. And in the lineup, Groucho Marx was in front of me. In line, and I'd never met him before, and I was, you know, in another one of my silly moods, I went, "What is your pleasure, sir?" And there was a tree there, and he jumped up in the tree and started being like a monkey. He said, "My pleasure is fucking, but right now I think I'll have something to eat." We're in Vegas. The phone rings one morning. I said, "Hello." He said, "It's me, get your ass over here." I said, "Okay." So I went over to Bobby's suite, and he said, "This is the material we're going to record. We're going to record in 3 weeks, and this is your band." He gave me the instrumentation. And the instrumentation was so interesting that I just took it as a challenge. 1 trumpet, 1 French horn, 3 saxes. I mean, the kinds of choices he made about brass and woodwinds were really curious in terms of the numbers. I wouldn't have thought of putting it together quite that way. And then strings. We had 35 pieces. But it looked really interesting. So then we started rehearsing the songs and getting the keys and all of that. And there was very little at that point interaction between Bobby and I. Basically, he knew a little bit about what he was going to get in the studio, but I kind of just showed up with the arrangements. But I had taken dictation for a year from him, and I knew him pretty well. Like when we did The World is Full of Beautiful Things, I didn't even call him to ask him if he'd like that concept. I knew it, you know, was Darren. That whole album is Darren. The thinking is Darren. This album probably once a year, and you know, for me it's just like Bobby and I are back together again.
It's a great
Especially after today, because we did that on stage. And that was the one day that Bobby was sick. And there's just a little bit of that you can hear in his voice. It's a little darker quality than all the other tracks. Bobby was very bright, you know. From the time that he almost died, when I think he was 13 years old, he read a lot of stuff. He bothered a lot of people because he had read and learned so much stuff about the business that he could basically tell lawyers how to be better lawyers than they were. And he made quite a few enemies by calling you on something that you screwed up on that he knew you could have done better at. And people didn't like to be told that. I thought one of the reasons that we got along so well is because he couldn't do what I did. And I thought he spent, after I left him, several albums attempting to prove maybe that he could. And it didn't work for me. He was never an arranger. After '68, when I left, the next time I saw him was at the Troubadour, and he had become Bob Darin. There was no hairpiece. He was wearing, I can't remember if we called them fruit boots or something, with no shoelaces, and funky jean clothes, and the monogram shirt. So I said, okay, I got it. He's going to be, very soon he's going to be completely Bob Darin. The monogram shirt's going to go, but he's going to take himself apart little by little and just try out kind of every little concept. I love the things we did. Simple Song of Freedom.
Oh, yeah.
It's one of the most direct pieces ever written. The folky quality of it and the kind of lyrics, and he said exactly what was on his mind, and it comes across in the song. That's a songwriter that comes from the tradition of songwriting, the older tradition of songwriting. So that means it's going to be melodic and harmonic. He chose the folk concept, which was right But he made decisions like that. So since he liked singing songs that were melodic and harmonic, that's the way he wrote. That's what I've been all my life. I've been a rhythm section player. Yes, I can write for strings and orchestra and all that kind of stuff and all the stuff I did for Bobby. But basically, I've always been a rhythm section player. Maybe that's a part I never even thought about that caused Bobby and I to get along so well. He had fabulous time. His sense of rhythm was wonderful. So it was so easy for us to work together. So if his time is good as the artist that we're supporting, and he fits in time-wise with the rhythm section, that's it.
Golden.
It doesn't get any better than that. Now we just talk about what's the level of the music that we're going to do. And we don't have to worry about a whole lot of basic stuff that it's very bothersome when it isn't right. If the person I'm working for has ideas that are musical, and I respect the musicality of the ideas, that's the easiest way for us to get along. He was always musical with his ideas, so his were not my ideas, and I never thought the way that he thought until after I worked with him for about a year. So I always took those ideas as a challenge. So the older songs, which are of melody and lyric, which means that the melody stands on its own and the lyric stands on its own. And this has to do with every single song that Bobby and I did together. We're all written from that standpoint. And when you think about the publishing aspect of a song, you needed to have 20 or 30 people record your song if you were going to make any money. In the last 15 to 20 years, if you have one artist that sells 500,000 CDs, you don't care if anybody else sings the song. And the writers don't care about it, and they don't write songs that anybody else can sing anyway. But the publishers don't care, they've already made their money. So the whole concept of songwriting has changed completely. It would be interesting to have Bobby here.
I'll say.
And to have this discussion of, you know, but I'm sure, like Streisand, there would be some songs of that have been written in the last 20 years that he would go after to make his own, in order to prove that whatever concept had evolved, he would be capable of being part of it, and I'm sure he would.